Namaste and welcome. So the talk today for Krishna Katha is titled The King Who Became a Lizard. What could this be about? I think most of you will have guessed already. But before I begin, I will offer my obeisances to my spiritual master, Jagat Guru Siddhaswarupananda. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Shrimati Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsariti Namane Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Adwaita and Gadha Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktavrindam. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, about a week ago, my daughter sent me a couple of video clips, very short video clips, because my granddaughter, Govinda Leela, she is learning how to surf. In fact, her father's teaching her how to surf, ride a surfboard. And so on these little clips, there she was standing up on a board, catching that wave. The whole thing looked very idyllic, the water was this beautiful blue colour, it was a summer, the air was clean, and she had this big smile on her face, she looked really healthy. But what was quite interesting is that same day, coincidentally, I also watched a short documentary that was filmed in a village in India. And this village was located in this large area, it was over 100 square miles, the whole area, which was an open coal mine, but it was dotted with villages. And this open coal mine had been there actually for more than 100 years. So it had gradually, over that time, gouged out and scarred Mother Earth quite dramatically. And when these seams of coal that are underground, when they are exposed, they've got these huge trucks nowadays, and when they're exposed to the air, the coal just spontaneously combusts. And so you have these little fires all dotted everywhere. And they try to put some of them out so they don't get huge. But basically the whole place is covered in these fires everywhere. So you can understand, you can sort of in your mind's eye see what the atmosphere would be like. So due to all these continuing little fires burning everywhere, the air is always thick with smoke and the ground is always hot. So the villagers' homes, they try to make them out of stone and things like that, but all the walls just crack all the time because the earth is hot and cools a little bit, then hot. A terrible place to have to live. And the person making the documentary asked some of the villagers, why didn't they just leave? And they all replied that that was the only way they knew how to earn enough money for maybe 1 to 2 meals a day. They would collect pieces of hot coals that had fallen from the giant mining trucks. So they'd collect these bits of coal and then they would sell them. So in the documentary, they interviewed a little 8-year-old girl who lived in one of the villages. So she's 8 years old, and my granddaughter is 8 years old. Every single day of the year, she has to get up early in the morning and go out and find these hot coals. They're really hot, but she doesn't have any gloves or any protection or anything like that. So she walks around, she's got no shoes, she's never had shoes, so the ground is always hot. So she's always experiencing a lot of pain in her feet, in her hands, but she collects all these pieces of coal and then she puts them in these ragged bags that they have, and she carries 2 of them on her head, 2 full bags of coals on her head, And every evening she sets out and she walks quite a long distance to another village that's not in that area and tries to sell. She goes door to door and tries to sell pieces of coal to the housewives who use the coal in their little stoves. So the contrast, just in that one day I was looking at the contrast between these really idyllic pictures of my granddaughter and this similarly aged girl in India, her life. And what really struck me, just looking at these two pictures, was that this is our journey here in this material world is very perilous. We don't know where we're going to be from one lifetime to another. In reality, our stay on this planet Earth is a mere stopover on our long, long journey in this material world. So today, the story, the Krishna story that I would like to read to you, one of the aspects of it is it highlights this perilous journey that we can go from one situation in one lifetime and find ourselves in a completely different situation in our next life. So let's begin now with this Krishna story. So, once upon a time, when Krishna was residing in Dwarka city, some of his sons, Samba, Pradyumna, Charu, Banu and Gada, and some of his other family members, they all decided to go for a picnic in a forest nearby. And after some time, they all became thirsty and started looking for some nice, clean drinking water. So this is where it begins now. And they soon found a well. But looking inside it, they discovered that the well was dry. And as they looked closer at the bottom of the dark well, they saw a peculiar creature. They were astonished, and one of the princes remarked, "It looks like a large lizard. It must be trapped down there." And then one of his brothers, he also questioned, "But how did it get there? Must be very hungry." So they're conversing like this. They all felt sorry for the lizard, and they tried various ways to catch it. They got these long pieces of rope, and they were trying to throw the rope down and hook it around the lizard and lift the lizard up, but nothing was working. Nothing at all. Everything failed. The lizard would slip out of it. So one of the princes said, "Let's go back to Dwarka and ask our father Krishna. He's a friend of all living entities." What a wonderful way of describing Krishna, the friend of all living entities. So when they went back there, on hearing their story, Krishna went with his family members to the well. And looking into the dark, dark well, Krishna saw the lizard that was down there. Then magically, he reached in with his left arm, which grew longer and longer, and easily lifted the lizard out. So he had an advantage, didn't he? Being the Supreme Person. Upon being touched by the hand of the glorious Supreme Lord, the lizard at once gave up its form and assumed the form of a demigod. His complexion was the colour of molten gold, and he was adorned with wonderful ornaments, clothes and garlands. Krishna's family members were just amazed when they saw this. Even though Krishna is the Lord and knower of everything, he smiled and he asked, "Who are you? Seeing your excellent form, I think you must surely be an exalted demigod. What past activity has brought you to this condition? We are eager to know about you, so please inform us about yourself. That is, if you think this is the proper time and place to tell us. So Krishna is so wonderful. He's not even forcing him to tell his story. He's saying, it's up to you. So this demigod, he bowed down to Krishna and respectfully replied, I am the son of Ikshvaku, and I am known as King Nrga. My Lord, you are aware of all actions done by the living entities, past, present, and future. Nothing can be hidden from you. Still, you have ordered me to explain my history, and I shall therefore narrate the full story. So we're going to get the full story now of what happened. I gave in charity as many cows as there are grains of sand on the earth, stars in the heavens, and drops of water in a rain shower. So he's speaking very poetically, but just to make the point that he gave away a lot of cows. And these were not ordinary cows. Each one was healthy and young and had given birth to only one calf. So they're in their prime of health. These cows were full of milk and very peaceful. All the cows were purchased with money that had been earned legally. Furthermore, their horns were gold-plated, their hooves were bedecked with silver plates, and they were covered with silken wrappers which were embroidered with pearls and necklaces. Very beautiful. I gave these cows in charity to distinguished Brahmins who were dedicated to truth. They were famous for their austerity, vastly learned in Vedic scriptures, and saintly in their behaviour. So very qualified Brahmins. I not only gave these Brahmins cows, but also land, gold, and houses, along with horses, elephants, silver, clothing, jewels, furniture, and chariots. So he was a very generous king, wasn't he? In addition, I performed Vedic sacrifices and executed various pious welfare activities. So he did even beyond all of that in pious activities. But once a cow belonging to a certain Brahmin wandered away and entered back into my herd. Unaware of this, I gave that same cow in charity to another Brahmin. So here's where the mistake happened. When the cow's first owner saw her being led away by this other Brahmin, he called out, she's mine. The second Brahmana, who had accepted her as a gift, replied, no, she's mine. King Nrga gave her to me. The two Brahmanas argued, and eventually they came to me. One of them said, you gave me this cow. And the other Brahmana said, no, you gave me this cow. Hearing this, I was bewildered, and finding myself in this terrible dilemma, I humbly begged both the Brahmins, I will give 100,000 of the best cows in exchange for this one. Please, just give her back to me. I did not know what I was doing. Please save me from this difficult situation, or I will surely fall into a hellish situation. The present Brahmin owner of the cow said, I don't want anything in exchange for this cow. And he left, very angry. And the other Brahmin declared, I don't want even 10,000 cows. And he too went away in an angry mood. So both the Brahmins left angry. Nothing was resolved. King Nrga continues his story to Krishna. Oh, my dear Krishna, oh, Master of the universe, At the time of my death, the agents of Yamaraj called me to his abode called Samyamani. There, Yamaraj himself questioned me. My dear king, your activities in your life as a king were flawless. Indeed, I see no end to the dutiful charity you have performed, or to the consequent enjoyment that you will receive in the radiant heavenly planets. But there was one discrepancy that arose in your actions. So do you wish to first experience the results of your pious activities or those of your one sinful activity? King Nrga said, I replied, first let me suffer my sinful reaction. Yamaraj declared, then fall. At once I fell, and while falling I saw myself becoming a lizard. However, even though I was a lizard, I did not forget my previous life as a king. I remained in that well as a big lizard for a very long time. Oh, Krishna, when I was a king, I was devoted to the Brahmins and generous to them, and I hankered for your audience. So to explain now what the king meant by hankering to see Krishna, Srila Viswanath Chakravarti Thakur, who was a great spiritual master in our parampara, he describes that when King Nrga mentioned that, he was referring to an incident concerning a certain great devotee that King Nrga had once met. This devotee was very eager to acquire a temple for a most beautiful deity of the Supreme Lord. And he also wanted copies of scriptures such as the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so when the king heard this, when King Nrga was informed about this, and being very generous, he arranged for a beautiful temple to be built for the deity, and he arranged for the scriptures to be supplied, to be given to this devotee. And the devotee, who was very satisfied with this, he declared to King Nrga, my dear king, may you have the audience of the Supreme Lord. That was his blessing. That was his desire for the king. And from that time on, the seed of desire to see the Lord was planted in the heart of King Nrga. So you can see all these incredibly generous things that he did for the Brahmins, but this one action for this devotee planted this seed in the heart of King Nrga. So that now that the king had the opportunity of seeing Krishna, he could understand that he had received the special mercy of this devotee and Krishna. He understood now what was going on. And he said, my dear Supreme Lord Krishna, because you have given me this body of a demigod, I will have to go to the heavenly planets. So I'm taking this opportunity to beg for your mercy, that I may have the benediction of never forgetting your lotus feet, no matter which form of life or planet I may be transferred to. Isn't that a wonder? That's the prayer of a devotee, isn't it? He wasn't concerned any longer of doing pious activities so he could go to the heavenly planets in his next life. His whole focus now was, please don't let me forget you. Upon being touched by the Lord's hand, when he reached in and grabbed him, and receiving the Lord's mercy, King Nrga's desire to serve the Lord was revived. So his eternal function of being the servant of the Supreme Lord in one fashion or another, in one taste or another, that was revived in him. And now that became what he wanted to do, was to serve Krishna. He glorified Krishna by chanting his holy names and begging, "O Govinda, please make me your property with the same merciful glance you used to enchant the cows. Even though I am a sinful living entity, please never let me forget you." Having spoken thus, King Nrga circumambulated Lord Krishna and touched his crown to the Lord's feet. Granted permission to depart, King Nrga then boarded a wonderful celestial plane and departed to the heavenly planets. So the Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna, the son of Devaki, who is especially devoted to the Brahmins, because remember, King Nrga was very generous with the Brahmins, but there'd been a mix-up where he had angered two Brahmins. So there was sort of this mixture happening in there. And Krishna is especially devoted to the Brahmins. So Krishna now turns around and he speaks to his sons that are gathered there, Samba, Charu and his other sons, and also other family members. He speaks to them now. If a person uses a Brahmana's property without receiving due permission, so if somebody uses the property of a Brahmin and that Brahmin hasn't said, yeah, you can use that now, bring it back when you're finished. They haven't done that. That property destroys 3 generations of the person's family. That's the repercussions. 3 generations after will have to take on the repercussions of that. But if a person takes a Brahmana's property by force, even if he uses other people to do it, maybe he uses, soldiers or other people to take the Brahmana's property, then 10 generations of his ancestors and 10 generations of his descendants are all destroyed. That's really heavy. So Krishna is really explaining to his sons, because they're princes, they will be in the position of being, looking after people in society and that. And here is the example set to really look after the Brahmins. Do not steal their property. Do not confiscate their property. So this was, and you see, King Nrga, he didn't purposely do it. He accidentally did it. But because of this, this benediction by this devotee that he had met, he was put into the body of a lizard. And then he gets to meet Krishna, and then everything changes in his life. But that's not what usually happens. Usually you just have to then take on your next body and take on the repercussions of that. Thus, Lord Krishna, who was always engaged in purifying the conditioned living entities, gave instructions not only to his sons and his family members and the inhabitants of Dwarka, but to all members of human society. After this, Krishna returned to Dwarka city, to one of his palaces. So there's actually many layers of lessons that were in this story. But the one that we are looking at is just in a single lifetime, King Nrga fell from the material position of being this very wealthy but very generous king, very pious king, very comfortable in his living situation, and he fell down directly into the next life of being this huge lizard who's stuck in this well. Right? He can't get out of this well. And it was dark, it was horrible, and he remembered being that king. But so he went from this to that in one lifetime. And that's really showing how precarious it is living in this material world. He was doing all the right things, but he just did one wrong thing, and he has to then, there's the consequences. But by Krishna's arrangement and by the blessing from this devotee, it all worked out wonderfully for King Nrga. So for one reason or another, or simply due to causeless mercy, in this lifetime we, you, me, all of us, we have come in contact with the grace of Krishna, with the grace of Lord Chaitanya, and with the grace of the devotee. So let us always stay close to chanting Krishna's names, stay close to our spiritual master and to Krishna. Harinama.
Hari Bol. Jai Lord Chaitanya. Jai Lord Nityananda. Hari Nama, Hari Nama. Hari Nama, Hari Nama, Hari Nama eva kevalo. Kaloa, Nasteva, Nasteva, Nasteva. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Krishna, Krishna, Hari Bol, Krishna, Krishna, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Krishna, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.